Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the Berkeley Staff Assembly's Programs and Events Committee for our second Pass the Mic event. Today's series features SCAR, which stands for Staff Circle on Anti-Racism, and Liz Granulin is our event moderator. We're very excited to speak today with our guests, and with that said, I'll pass the mic to Liz to start our conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm going to just dive right into the questions here. So what is SCAR and why was it formed?
SCAR is a staff group at the law school, and originally it was formed. Nancy and I had gone to see Debbie Irving and talk about her book, Waking Up White. And she's a very privileged white woman who realized one day that her privilege had blinded her to the experience of Black Americans around the country, even though she considered herself socially progressive and was working on educational justice issues. So Nancy and I think, recognized a little bit of ourselves in this and wanted to be better. And so we got together. Nancy is awesome at being organized and making things happen. And so she got us starting meeting regularly. That was probably the spring or summer of 2015. We were all still reeling from Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, and then over that summer, Sandra Bland. And there were a lot of campus initiatives around students and faculty, but really nothing for staff. And so we needed a place to get together and kind of talk and vent and understand what was happening. And for many of us to really educate ourselves and figure out how to exist in this world a little bit more equitably. So, and then Amatullah was with us from the beginning. Amatullah, do you want to say how you came to be part of it?
Well, you and Nancy gave me the spiel that you just gave as far as the event with Debbie Irving. And I attempted to read her book and never really got through the end of it because I didn't believe some of the things she said in it, but it could be a cultural difference. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. So when the two of you approached me, I was curious to see how it would unfold. And so I contacted some people. The three of us contacted other folks and invited them to attend meetings. It was a small group initially, but gradually it began to grow as we started to sponsor events and as we went on the journey to really educate ourselves in this area, this field of knowledge.
Fantastic. What are some of the goals of SCAR? If you, Thembi, if you want to kind of enlighten us on that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, speaking personally, for me, when I think about SCAR, the goals for me to broaden awareness of what it means to be an anti-racist, to really try to support our BIPOC community, to amplify BIPOC voices and our DEIB leadership on the campus and in our community. I think it's important to share experiences that illustrate the issues and challenges that BIPOC face in particular. I think it's just a really great way to increase folks' understanding. And I think there's a real need to increase cultural competency on our campus. We look at so many things. Well, does this person have the right skill set for their job, for their position? But we're not taking into consideration all too often cultural competency and what it looks like to work in a broad and diverse community.
Thank you. You kind of already mentioned this, but how do you balance providing a safe space for BIPOC staff and anti-racist work by white staff as well?
Well, I think it's important when you're going to be meeting in a group, regardless of the group size, to have some basic ground rules and that everyone agrees with, which may include talking in generalities. I think it's important to focus on issues rather than to focus on specific individuals. Of course, some things come up and, you may reference a political figure or a social justice activist or something like that. And I think everyone who attends any kind of session needs to be committed to fully participating and contributing in the conversation or in the workshop, whatever the event might be. I do think that sometimes it might be easier, although I don't know if I really agree with it, to have a separate meeting time sometimes for just the African-American staff members or for the separate from the regular SCAR meeting. Because sometimes there might be, as Thembi referenced, some cultural competencies, but also some nuances that language that might be used in the African-American community might be misunderstood or might cause some dissension in a larger group. So I think that's an important thing to consider. And tones, voice tones. Sometimes people can talk very loud and people get the wrong idea. And so the impact of the tone of the voice is different from maybe the intention of the speaker.
Well, I'll jump in and say a little something about community agreements, which I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe a couple years into meeting, we decided to be pretty clear about community agreements. It may have even come up after we did some of the diversity and equity trainings on campus. And community agreements, creating safe space was really important, you know, kind of confidentiality, step up, step back, people who would normally talk a lot, maybe don't talk so much. There are several other kind of pieces of community agreements that are important for creating the safe space. Yeah, and when Trish and I first started the staff circle, I think a lot of the goal was building relationships so that we could talk in a meaningful way about really difficult and painful issues in ways that would educate us and allow us to be activists and advocates and, you know, create safe space for all staff at the law school in particular to be their best possible selves and contribute.
And if I could just piggyback on that a little bit, we do have a community agreement in place for the staff circle on anti-racism. We actually co-opted a lot of the language that the Dismantling Racism Study and Action Group uses. So I just want to kind of give them a shout out, a campus-wide group, very similar to ours. Rebecca Ulrich and Lisa Ho and Michelle Radkin over there lead that, and it's a wonderful group.
Fantastic, thank you. So how do you think that staff can get involved in racial justice work? You know, oftentimes this work is put on the shoulders of the most impacted by racial injustice and those with less power to affect the change.
Well, I think for the staff people who are represented by a union, there's certain defined steps you can use that are maybe spelled out in your contract that can help with that. For an example, labor management meetings. Your union rep can bring up issues at a labor management meeting on the campus level or the departmental level to let either the department or to let labor relations on the campus to know that there are some issues or that we think should be addressed, and maybe present proposals or ideas on how it can be meaningfully addressed. Also, if you're in a department where your supervisor meets regularly, I think if the person feels competent or comfortable enough, the individual can, you know, approach their department head or their immediate supervisor and ask for either training and development sessions that deal with diversity and racial issues, or, you know, to request that maybe during some portion of a department meeting that, that there's some discussion of either current issues or campus issues or you know, the general issues of the United States. I think those are easy ways that you can do it. And then also the individual can research the sources that are available on the campus, contact those sources, or, you know, even some broader community-based sources, find out basic information and then present it either to your supervisor or department head or even the dean, you know, and it depends on what the structure is in a particular particular department or unit.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You know, I just want to add that I think now is such a great time to try to move the needle with everything going on in our nation, our country, and you know, all the institutional racism is actually being looked at now in a way that it wasn't, you know, even a year ago or a year and a half ago. And so, you know, talk about it. So I would just say, discuss it with others. You know, if it's you and a couple of your colleagues in your department going to your leadership together, now you're talking about collective action, right? So if you can speak, you know, as a group and say, hey, what about this or what about that? How about instituting a study group? How about, you know, thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work in the actions that we're taking in terms of our programs, in terms of our events or whatever. Yeah, so definitely encourage folks to make those moves.
I agree. I would just add, yes, now definitely is the time. And petitions, letter writing campaigns, speakers and events are all tried and true ways to raise awareness and push forward on change.
Wonderful ideas. Love them. So what support have you received in regards to the broader need for racial justice on campus and in our society? And what support are you still hoping to receive?
So I'll talk a little bit about campus. I'm a part of the Cal Coaching Network on campus, which is a fairly new community of practice. And in the past year, we've had several programs, and there's definitely, with Eugene Whitlock and Lusana Hotep at People and Culture, I feel like there is a real a real focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging as a component of a coaching culture on campus, in a way that we're learning how to be respectful in how we interact with one another and creating a culture where everybody can contribute. And I remember one program we had last year, and you know, everybody takes away different things from trainings. And the thing I took away from this training was, what as a white person can I do and contribute in meetings or when, you know, encountering racism. And the comment was, don't be surprised. And I thought that was really interesting, you know, like, yeah, that really spoke to me. So I think staff activism on campus, the Cal Coaching Network has been really important. And, you know, I've often felt that being a staff member at the university, and maybe it's partly because of my positionality, being a white person, ask for forgiveness, not permission. I mean, like, I've been able to, you know, we started the Staff Circle on Anti-Racism. Nobody in the administration said you should do this kind of work. So I think that there's a lot of juice that we can give ourselves and each other to do this really important work.
And I think that because we didn't ask for permission, because it was basically something that we started on our own at lunchtime, we would, you know, have a room that we would reserve, and we'd have our meeting during our lunch. And so it was essentially a working lunch. And then as we progressed, we would start to sponsor events, and that gave us more notice in the law school community. And the quality of the events, and also the fact that we reached out to the equity and inclusion unit and was able to use some of the resources that were available through that unit, it gave more credibility to what we were doing. So people saw that this was a group that was taking some form and some shape, and that they could come to our events, learn something that can benefit them, and that they could take back into their individual work units.
Great, thank you so much. Those are great. What projects is SCAR working on, and what are some of the previous SCAR projects or initiatives that you guys have put on?
Yeah, so I think I'll let others speak to some of our past projects. Since the Staff Circle on Anti-Racism has been in existence for over 5 years now, there's been quite a large a body of work, I guess, in terms of programs and events. But most recently, we, in terms of amplifying, you know, BIPOC voices too, we've had Emily Bruce, which is our Director of Equity and Inclusion for our Berkeley Law Student Services, give a talk on an anti-racist approach to supporting law students, lessons and strategies. This is such a meaningful talk. We also had our Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, Kristen Theus Alvarez, give a talk on a recently published statement that the admissions group put together called Our Commitment to Dismantling Systemic Racism. And so that's outward facing, that's actually on their website. And it's so that everyone, you know, incoming students and others see that and know that there is a commitment and know that this is something that we at the law school are seriously looking at and discussing. And so we even had Joseph Lindsay, who's Associate Director of Admissions and Scholarship Programs, give a talk. He's also the co-chair of the Native American Staff Council, and he gave a talk about land acknowledgement and, you know, how to put together a land acknowledgement, who to kind of reference for it, but also that, you know, don't just give a land acknowledgement and have it be kind of performative, but really think about what it means and what you can do and how you can support the Native American, Indigenous First Nation community. I think coming up, we've got, we've got a reparations talk coming up. We've got a wonderful undergrad coming as a guest speaker, Maureen Simmons. And then we've got, I really want to give a shout out to Patricia Juarez, who gave a BIPOC and white supremacy workshop last year, and she's going to do that again. And SCAR is involved with that as well. So that's a few things. And then we're also looking at increasing diversity for staff hiring, and we're working with our local HR unit, and they're great. We're working on that. So really developing a process and procedures for how to increase your applicant pool and go about hiring by looking at things like cultural competency and whatnot.
I think that's important. The last thing that Thembi mentioned, the hiring practices, because I know at the law school for many, many years, as an African-American, our numbers were so little at the law school, considering as the law school staff and faculty numbers increased, you know, maybe doubling or tripling, ours just say flatlined and even decrease in some instances. And one other point that was real sensitive in terms of hiring, when you hire supervisors or directors of units, that they have a mindset that does not make them see a potential employee whose first language is not English as a handicap for that person, because I think that at the time when I was working at the law school and when we first set up SCARS, that the whole idea of English as a second language and the employees who may have been first language Spanish speaking or even Chinese or Korean, that very often those employees really felt that they weren't appreciated by their supervisors, and also that their performance records were, or performance evaluations took a ding and were evaluated at a lower level because they weren't first language English speaking employees. And that probably still exists to a certain extent today, because it's that you see that bias in the general society as far as, well, if you're in this country, you need to speak English. You know, a lot of people still have that mindset. And I think that's something that needs to be really tackled. And a hush fell over the room.
No, I wanted to give some space if anybody else had some of the older events that, you know, we've put on, you know, traditional.
Well, I'll jump in and say a little bit about things we've done in the past. We had a film showing in 3 parts of Equal Justice is a local organization, and they had a film, Healing Justice, and we showed that film in 3 parts and had discussions afterwards at lunchtime in the law school building with lunch. Oh my gosh, that was, seems like an ancient memory. We'll be back in person, I'm sure. We also did equity and inclusion trainings that were from the campus, and those were very well attended. I mean, at one point I did do a little bit of math about how many people we had reached with our programs, and it was, you know, more than 200. I'm sure the numbers are, of course, continuing to grow. Amatullah and I had a StoryCorps conversation that was really interesting and a super fun project. And we also had a program early on with John Powell and Bertrand Ross and other faculty members. And that was a really terrific program too. So here we are looking at the future. I'm super excited about the reparations program, getting a study group going on that, and just how much the group has grown, and people are, you know, really enthusiastic and jumping in and joining. So, and this conversation has been terrific to get a chance to tell the larger community about the work that we're doing and how, you know, staff can empower themselves to make a difference.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure chatting with all of you. I know I learned a lot, and hopefully those of you who are tuning into this recording have learned something as well. If you have questions for the Staff Circle on Anti-Racism, please email the BSA Programs and Events Committee, and we would be happy to pass along your questions. Please tune in for the next Pass the Mic event. Until then, take care.